I am philanthropic because of Iris Buhl. She taught me many things, but to not be afraid to ask people to support a cause. And I'm very proud to have been involved in Nashville Cares since the late 80s, and as well as Outrageous. And that's where we first really got to know each other. And if there's anybody in the city that deserves an honor like this, it's Iris Buhl.
I think I get the responsibility or the credit for bringing Iris to Nashville Cares. Back in the late 80s, she and I were both volunteering for WPLN, for public radio, and I was on the air, and she was working the phones, I'm sure, she was raising money. And they had a fundraiser later in the year, and Iris came up and said, "John, I want to know about Outrageous, and I want to know about Nashville Cares. I want to be part of it." So I told her, and she volunteered with us the next year, and of course she was great with that. And then the next year, she and Michael Corzine co-chaired Heartstrings, which was a major fundraiser that came through town, and we had to have our own committee here, and we made a lot of money on that. And before long, Iris was the development director at Cares, and she was part of Cares Forever After.
I was searching for a new director of education as well as development at that time. This was back in '95. I had barely got here. It was less than a year. I remember that, interesting enough, she applied for the education position because that was one of her interests. That was one of the things that she was involved in Planned Parenthood. And I just looked at her resume and knew a little bit about her and said, we can talk about education if you want, but I need you in development. And her immediate reaction is, "I don't know whether I'm going to be any good about that. It's just I don't have formal training." And I said, "Trust me, you'll bring what we need to begin to build that position." And she did.
The truth is that you cannot summarize Iris Buhl in a mere few words. From her early beginnings with the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s, helping with women's rights in the 1970s, and the AIDS crisis in the 1980s and 90s, Iris has shown that she is a champion of the underdog.
It is no coincidence that today is a National Nonprofit Day. I know I'd never heard of it before, but I'm pretty sure Iris had something to do with that as well. Judy and I, first memory of Iris with Cares is at a Steve Smith dinner, where we were honored to have her sit at our table. There, Iris informed us kindly and gently of the need for monthly giving to Cares, as well as, and almost as importantly, the need for place cards at your table. So we learned a lot from Mike and Iris at all of those dinners over the last couple of decades that we had the pleasure of knowing them.
Another thing that impressed me early on with Iris and working with Nashville Cares is that there was no barriers for her as far as societal or money or cultural barriers. If she wanted to do something, she would open her home and everybody would be invited. It was there for everyone, and everybody was included. Really made you feel like you wanted to be part of that organization, and that you also felt like you could contribute to Nashville Cares. There was something you could do no matter what, and it didn't always have to be, fiscal. It didn't have to be money. You could physically do something. You could volunteer. You could work. You could help us with fundraising. You could help us at Outrageous. There was that motivation.
She was very bold and very beautiful and very regal in my mind. And not knowing back then, but as a little young flamboyant gay boy, I also knew that she had my back all the time, 100%.
The first time I met Iris was at an event, a fundraising event meeting. I think it was for Night in White, and she was the director of development, and that was in the early 90s when people were suffering and dying from HIV. She was out there really asking for the dollars because we had to have the funding. She was asking from a place, she was a straight ally. She was one of the earlier straight allies for Nashville Cares, and she knew we had to raise money to take care of the people that needed it, that were being shunned from their families, that didn't have support, didn't have insurance, and she knew that somebody had to go out and ask for these dollars. A lot of people did this work, but Iris was an early straight ally to the LGBT community and understood how important that her helping find funding and allies and alignments among all the city for Nashville Cares was paramount.
She was amazing. As soon as I met her, we clicked immediately. She saw all my flaws, she saw all my irreverent behavior, and she embraced it. She encouraged me to be me. Yeah, she said wonderful things to people, and she spoke her opinion. She was very opinionated, which was the beauty of her. And when she said kid, she meant kid. You were her kid, and she loved you so much. And so that's what she means to me and the community, and how much she really embraced everybody.
I think the legacy for Nashville Cares having this Iris Buhl Award is going to be something that lives on, because a lot of people knew Iris. Iris knew everybody. I would catch Iris at places where I'd go, "Why are you here, girl? What's going on?" And she was just everywhere. And so having an award named after her continues her legacy for all the work she did in the community. And for those who knew about her or just remembered, if they didn't know her name, they'd go, "Where's that classy woman that had the white hair?" We just always knew Iris was always there. And having an award like this keeps her there, keeps her in our hearts, and keeps her in the community's heart as well. So I'm really, really glad that this is being offered through CARES.